welcome to Combat Thoughts. I'm Robbie.
I'm Lee.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to take a deeper look at the culture and philosophy behind martial arts. Sumo's probably not well known enough in the UK. Can you give us just a little overview from a more educated perspective, and then we'll get onto your personal journey?
Sure. So, as one would find, sumo wrestling itself is over 2,000 years old, but amateur sumo as a sport has kind of developed considerably over the last, I would say, about 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Great Britain is one of the originals in terms of countries that formed a federation. Currently, amateur sumo, which is what I'm involved in, is spread over 6 continents and 80 plus countries. There is an overriding body called the International Sumo Federation. They were actually set up after Great Britain's federation in 1985. But that's since been based in Derby in the East Midlands.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the history of sumo and British sumo. But my journey began about 5 years ago when I was 35 years young.
No problem. So 35 years, quite late to get into a combat sport in general. How did it all happen?
Well, born and raised in this country, in the United Kingdom, in England, I saw the sport, the professional version of the sport, on Channel 4. They used to show it there, and I'm sure many people of my kind of generation may recall that. But eventually it was phased out. And then with the advent of the internet, it was something that I had come across some 5 years ago. And when I did, it just sparked, a thought came in my mind that I wonder if there's a following of the sport in the UK. And that's when I done some research and I found what I shared with you a moment ago in terms of the British Sumo Federation in Derby. Got in touch with the person who runs it, a gentleman by the name of Steve Pateman, whose alias name is Sumo Steve. Very apt, I'm sure you'd find.
To the point.
Or agree. And yeah, he was very, very welcoming. And I simply gave him my stats, my age, my size, etc., and my background insofar as sports are concerned. And he said, "You're most welcome to give it a go." So I did the following month. This was November 2016, and I've not looked back since. It's been an incredible journey. There have been 8 tournaments in the UK till date that I've been a part of. And my record stands at 1 silver and 7 gold. So I am the current British champion.
Tremendous. Yeah, well, look, it's clearly something that's resonated with you quite strongly. What was it about seeing this the first time you saw sumo, and what was it that made you say, I want to be part of that?
A number of things, really. I mean, the exact specific one at the time was that I saw someone give an open palm thrust to someone's face, and I thought, ouch. And I wondered if that was, to disrespect the other person. But from the commentary that I was hearing on the side, it was very interesting how it was explained that this is not done to disrespect the person, but rather to disturb their sense of balance. Because what you find is if your face is in one direction or your hand, you can't push in the other.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And the game, or the sport, it's very, very simple. very brutal, I might add. It can be very brutal as well, but very simple in that you're in a very small space, 15-foot diameter circle. And the rules are that, as most would know, you go at it one on one, and um, the objective is to either get your opponent out of the space first or down. So when I say down, the only part of your body that's allowed to touch the circle are the soles of your feet. If any other part of your body is brought to touch the canvas or the clay, you've lost. The other person's won. It's a best of one, so you really got to be your best.
No room for mistakes.
Nah, none at all.
It interests me because I think a lot of people might think that sumo's a purely grappling art, but the thrust to the face, I mean, strikes are allowed to an extent.
Yeah.
Um, that's one fundamental misunderstanding about sumo a lot of people have, but I find it interesting about the cultural sort of implications of it.
Hmm.
I got into I got into sumo a lot last year. Where I'm watching Hakuho's last couple of tournaments.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it was interesting to see. There was one particular bout where he really went for the striking aspect, really slugged it out with someone to try and basically knock them out, but kind of got as the council. I don't know about the politics, but it was the council in Japan really
Hmm.
didn't like that so much.
Yeah.
I find are these specifically Japanese influences, or are they sumo influences in general? And do you have a sort of a cultural bias and a sort of sport bias towards performing in certain ways?
So Hakuho, who you mentioned, on paper is the goat, the greatest of all time. There are several divisions and several ranks within the top division. Hakuho was one of the 73 yokozunas till date. Currently, there's
Uh-huh.
only one active Yokozuna Terunofuji. But Hakuho, who's just recently retired, yes, he was known for being quite offensive. Um, and I guess if I compare it to other sports, when you're at the top of your game, um, I'm cautious of using the word cheap shots, but when you're doing a hanker, as in you're slipping to the side, or you're smacking someone's face with an open palm, of course, it's frowned upon. It's within the rules. You can do it, but it's not seen as fitting of someone who has achieved that status.
Hmm.
So that's where you might have felt that, or the commentary that you would have heard might have suggested, ooh, that's a bit, touch and go. The Yokozuna Liberation Council or the Japanese Sumo Association may have sort of commented on that as being controversial. But
Hmm.
he was also a master of so many other techniques. He was very, very versatile, and is really someone that people look up to even today.
Absolutely. And are there sort of ideals within the techniques and the way people conduct themselves? Are there sort of aspects that sumo tries to promote?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, there's two styles. There's either your both come under grappling, as you touched upon earlier. So one is the pusher thruster, in which you would do the strikes, which you said you were not so familiar with previously, which is fine. The other is the belt technician. So you have this belt, the mawashi, which on its own weighs about 3 to 5 kg. So it's quite a heavy piece of kit, but it's
Hmm.
on there to be used as for
Yeah.
leveraging to sort of get someone off kilter,
Hmm.
if
That's the
that
thing I've
makes
seen. It's like
sense.
the kind of arm round the back, isn't it? And take a
Yeah,
grip, take a
you
grip.
could do it from
That I've seen.
you
I've
could do it
seen
from the
that.
front, the side, or the back.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But essentially, the game based on the sport is based on a number of things, but balance is key in that, and
Mhm.
that's a big tool in keeping balance or getting someone off it. how you're basically trying to develop and maintain a lower center of gravity, raise your opponent's center of gravity, and essentially push them out or then take them down.
I
So
think that's a
some
good
people
segue
would
into
look
a
at
question.
some. Sorry.
Sorry. I was going to say it's a segue into a question I had. We spoke on the podcast a lot about kind of the first time you go to a gym or first training session, kind of how intimidating, how scary it is. What was that? What does a traditional training session look like? And then kind of your first training session, what was that like?
So my first session was just with the coach, and of course he wants people to come back, so he wasn't that you know intimidating. Although I tell you what, he is hard as bricks. He's a really tough man on the inside and out. But no, he's a real community worker as well. Is Steve? So that wasn't so intimidating. But in terms of my first competition, because I was actually just thrown straight in the deep end and put in a competition and won it. That was a little bit more intimidating because you're sort of, as you would, comparing yourself to somebody else, whether that's in relation to height or weight or definition or experience or style. You don't really get time to study your opponent. Essentially, you will then look towards others and feel maybe that they are going to influence how you might perform or not, as the case may be. But ultimately, like most other combat sports, sumo is about being in the moment. And so you have to almost have those thoughts which keep you in check about the other people around you, whether you get a chance to study them as much as you'd like or not, but then bring it back to yourself. It's about being grounded. It's about having certain values, certain skills, a certain emotional intelligence, and building on that. And that's not something that you can do in one training session or one tournament. It takes a lifetime. And that's really what the journey is about for me, to see how I can continually improve myself, but also help others. I heard a lovely proverb, which was that when we broaden our outlook from competition to contribution, then life becomes a celebration. So this is what I'm doing, in that I'm looking at how far I can push myself on a competitive level, but I'm also trying to give back by supporting the coach who has empowered me, who's entrusted me along with some other wrestlers in our team, and being accessible for people closer to me here in West London to have other people experience the same. And what's actually amazing about amateur sumo is three things in particular. So one is that there are different weight classes. The other thing is that there is no age restriction, which we can expand upon if you like. But basically, what I'm saying here is that in Japan, there is an age restriction. If you're over a certain age, you're just going to be watching from the sidelines. And the final point that I want to say is a USP to amateur sumo is quite fitting today because it's International Women's Day, in that women wrestle as well.
Is that not something that happens in Japan and traditional sumo? Then it's much more limited.
That's right. It's very orthodox. It's men only. As before, you cannot get in if you're over 23. And there are no weight classes. There's almost just like an absolute weight where you look at the average, and the average weight of someone there is about 150 kilos, which is a lot of man.
23 is quite a young age, Stephen, as well, isn't it?
and that's the cutoff. So people would have started obviously much before in preparation.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I knew about the kind of male only. I researched that, but I didn't know about the age limit. That feels really young. So it kind of
If
limits.
you're a university champion, if you've achieved significantly, then they'll push it up to 25.
Yeah.
But that's it. If you're older than that, then you're just looking
Yeah.
from the sides. And in how brutal the sort of lifestyle is over there, you'd really see people wrestling beyond sort of your late 30s.
Mhm.
Well, people do often end up. I've seen a lot of sumo fighters end up with quite shot knees and stuff like that. Must be quite a hard sport, especially if you get yourself up to 150 plus kilos. It's just going to take such a toll on your body.
Well, my view, if I can share, is that it's not about the gross figure on the scales, it's about the body composition.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't mind weighing 150, 200, whatever that figure is, as long as my body composition was right in terms of muscle to fat to water. We need all of it, but in what ratio? That's the question.
Mm.
And that's where technique comes in. You see some people, they look extremely lean, but they are of that size because muscle weighs more and their flexibility, my God. So it's quite different in Japan, um, without a doubt, because of the funding as well. In
Mhm.
amateur sumo federations, it's all self-funded. That's another big challenge that we have. But ultimately, um, we do it for the love of it.
Yeah.
And is sumo is it growing much in the UK? Is it expanding and developing a lot?
So my view is yes. It's gradual, but again, there's a saying that a slow burn makes the gravy. Basically, it's about what you do. It's about what
Hmm.
you do. So I am here with you lovely lads, chatting today to your audiences and hopefully sharing some of the sumo love. Um, but I'm constantly trying to integrate with the local community
Hmm.
and spread awareness, raise awareness as well in that way. And others are doing the same in the Midlands up north, so that when we have these regional or national training sessions and tournaments, more people have an opportunity to watch and hopefully take part. Because I feel that this country has huge potential, but I'm going to come up with another one, right? The saying is that if you don't market yourself, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. Only you know you're doing it. So it's all about marketing. It's all about marketing, but performing also. Performing also. So yeah, if I give an example, we done a very recent. I done a very recent taster session with um, an affiliate club of British Judo here in West London, in Hillingdon. And it was two back-to-back sessions. One was with these 5 to 12-year-old kids whose parents were also there. They absolutely loved it. And straight after that, it was with the adults who also took a real fancy to it and said, "When are you coming back?" So we're working on doing more with British Judo as we are with some other combat sports because ultimately it's a complement. It
Yeah.
really complements and shakes up their training. And it's something that we want to do more and more of, but also develop British sumo in its own right.
Mhm.
Of course, and mentioning those other martial arts, I mean, what is it about sumo that draws you in versus, I don't know, starting jujitsu or wrestling or something like that? Why is sumo special for you?
Um, I would never put one sport over the other. They're all lovely in their own way. But
Hmm.
what I would say is that I have seen that those more developed sports in certain markets, because you'd argue sumo, being a national sport of Japan, is very developed over there.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But these other martial arts that you sort of speak about, um, they have a very respected but very drawn out process of progression. Whereas if you look towards sumo, not just British sumo, but amateur sumo in general, heck, even professional sumo, it's purely based on performance. You can basically um, do well very, very quickly.
Mm.
That's not to take away from other sports that you do. A lot of our team do sambo, do BJJ, do rugby, and
Mhm.
all sorts. But they love this because it means easy progression. There's also a sense of community, of course, as with the others.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess there's also an underlying respect. You see in some
Mhm.
martial arts, they've become quite commercial. There's a lot of trash talking. You won't get that here. So if
Yeah.
that's your thing, by all means, go ahead, look at that or take part in it. But here, you know, um, it's about understanding that often the barrier is not what it seems in front of you, but what is within. And people will help you to overcome that. And when you have overcome that, you think, wow, where was I and where am I now? Let's carry on with the journey and see where this is going to go. My biggest opponent, if I give an example, I say opponent loosely. He's a very good friend of mine now. Um, his name is Neil Scott. They call him Nelly for short. He's a Derby lad and about my age, but not my size. I'm 6'2" and 125 kilos, and
Mhm.
he's 6'7", and when I first faced him, he was 175 kilos. So it was very much a David and Goliath situation. I saw him first time face to face, and I thought, "Gosh, how am I going to get past you?" But then it was the divide and conquer thinking process that a part is not as big as the whole. That when we
Mhm.
began, I just focused on a part, and with God's grace, with a bit of confidence and just going for it, I was able to beat him in that match. We've had some historic matches in the past, but we've also uh, worked together. Worked together because another thing that the listeners, perhaps yourselves, you're not aware of, is that in amateur sumo, there's also a team format. So you're not having more than one on one in a particular match. But
Hmm.
supposing you have Team GB versus Team Norway. So you'll
Hmm.
have three people from one side and three people from the other. And basically, the team that gets two wins has won for the whole team.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
that's another angle to basically having serious fun.
Well, interesting because it adds a whole sort of level
New
of
dimension.
it's a whole level of accountability. It's a sort of nervousness. So in jiu-jitsu competition, if I lose, it's like, oh, well, it's kind of like I want to win for my team, but at the end of the day, they haven't actually lost. It's only me. The team format gives a whole new stress, a whole new
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I never also would have thought that the 120 kilo man was going to be David in the David and Goliath story.
I was
I
going to
mean,
say the size of me and you, Robbie. It's Goliath against Goliath.
Yeah. Well, Manny, look, we're coming up to the half-hour mark,
okay.
like we said about at the start. I guess I ask a couple of things. I mean, firstly, are there any sort of points you wanted to hit on? Anything you wanted to cover off that you've not mentioned already?
I could go on for hours. So really, it's a matter of what you guys want to know.
um, Lee, anything you wanted to cover off at the moment?
Yeah, because one for me, you've spoke a lot about the kind of the balance, the flexibility, the strength, the technique.
Hmm.
What would you kind of say is the key ingredient to being kind of not just naturally good at it, but being able to pick it up quickly? Is it a kind of focus on the technique? Is it that strength? Is it the kind of, I don't know, core strength, low center of gravity? What do you kind of value as the most useful skill?
Wow. So for me, it's of course a composite of many factors which I've touched upon. Um, but at the heart of it, it's about your values, and that is in line with my message as well. Then, which is that it's about being a champion of values. You know,
Hmm.
because it's about being grounded, and being grounded can't just be about your physical state. Um, it has to be about where you are mentally, and that's almost like an iceberg where what's underneath is basically your values. So I'm
Hmm.
talking about um, your selflessness, you know, in knowing that the sport is always bigger than the athlete. I'm talking about your composure, your calm, rather than getting angry when you get smacked in the mouth. So then at that stage, being able to respond rather than react, you know, and you can
Hmm.
take that outside of the circle at school, at work, at home. It's very transferable. Um, other values like contentment, thinking as long as you're giving your best at a particular moment in time. If you didn't medal, you didn't medal. Don't be scared of falling down. Be scared of not getting back up. So being
Yeah.
content with if you've done your best. Um, being in a state of what we call detached attachment, you know, where as a value, um, you love people and use things, not the other way around. Except
Hmm.
you're interdependent with them. So if those people, if those things, that title, for example, that I'm British champion, if that's not there tomorrow, you don't feel like you've lost your bearings.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going a little deep, but that's my
Yeah.
nickname.
No, because
And
I
then,
think what you've discussed tonight and what you've said actually comes to a lot of what we talk about in this podcast is the purity of martial arts.
yeah,
So like there is a big commercialization in martial arts and there is money to be made in different sports and things like that. But
sure.
ultimately when you boil down to what a martial art is, it's what you're describing. And that's what martial arts was for a lot of people before it became a money thing. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah, yeah.
there's a real purity in the way you speak about your martial art.
So, thank you, thank you. I give credit to that to my spiritual guides and mentors, my parents and my coach, of course. But the last value that I often talk about, not to you know suggest it's in any order of priority, but is humility. That it's
Hmm.
very much about being humble rather than harnessing ego. So for me, it's about being a champion of values, and maybe I say this as I said because of my influences, but also because I'm an influencer, and I'm not talking about on social media channels, but because I'm a young father. So I'm thinking my son is looking to me, 6 year old Ash, and you know. I may or may not be able to be a model, but I'm certainly a role model, and for him, so I need to be a certain way in my thoughts, in my feelings, in my actions, and that's what I'm trying to um, express through sumo, and I'm having fun. So if you don't enjoy what you do, then you need to change it. Change what you do or how you do it. So that's my take on the skills that you need among others.
Mm.
What's most important in sumo in martial arts for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more about the sort of spiritual journey then,
Oh
rather
yeah,
than yeah. Well, it's about the life lessons it teaches you, which I think is normally the thing that the people who seem to get most out of martial arts talk about, whatever the martial art happens to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few people who enter martial arts and do it properly and don't touch that kind of spiritual side of it and that element. So I think kind of tapping into that is the important part of getting into martial arts. I think from my perspective, and I know kind of being the advocate for sumo, if people wanted to kind of get into it, do a training session, where would you recommend they kind of look up?
I would definitely recommend everyone looks at sumo.org.uk. It's a bit of a dated website, but we'll update it eventually. It has Steve's details on it, and I'd recommend you go and see him. But if you are then closer to London or Yorkshire, then we have those satellite locations as well, where someone could come and watch, and more to the point, take part and experience it for themselves. I mean, I could go on in my 5 years and talk about how I have traveled to over 8 countries, including the home of it all in Osaka, Japan. I couldn't quite do Tokyo. That's certainly still on the list, and hopefully will be done soon. I've had the great fortune of representing Great Britain on all those occasions, and have medalled for the country abroad as well. But it's not about me; it's about you. So I would love for this exchange that we're having to ignite something in other people as well, to say to themselves, could I be good at this? Let's give it a go, and not let their size or their age or their gender or anything like this be a barrier. Because if you don't actually have a go, you're not going to know. And especially when I talk about the weight classes, it doesn't always have to be 125 versus 175. It could very much be about being pitted against someone of your own height and weight, or someone in that sort of range. I'm sure you'd find it an amazing experience.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast and checking us out on YouTube, Facebook and Instagram under the name Combat Thoughts. We'll see you next time.